Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Thad Dungan. I am Worldwide Head of Automotive Business Development at Amazon Web Services. Right off stage is Brian Cursor. I'm really excited to be with him because he serves as the Chief Technology Officer at Toyota Connected. So this is early in the week. You guys should be fresh. Going to do a quick commercial. I hope you guys are fresh even after Midnight Madness. But quick commercial on other sessions that are coming up this week. Whether you represent a large OEM or original equipment manufacturer, to the latest startup, there's something on this agenda all week that will make your reInvent experience excellent. You can double click on any of these, dive deep, whether it's connected vehicles or autonomous vehicle development or smart factory, digital supply chain. We have some great customers lined up here for you. BMW, we have Volkswagen, Uber, and of course, Toyota Connected with Brian. Also, if you get a chance tomorrow, Dean Phillips, who is our global technical lead for automotive, will be demonstrating what's next in our Connected Vehicle Solution 2.0. You don't want to miss this. So please take note of the times, the locations, the venues, because it'll make your experience that much better. So we've got a big agenda. It's packed. Let's get right into it. So when Brian and I were working on this presentation, the first thing we asked is, what do you think these folks, want to get out of this solution or this session? And it's pretty simple. We want you to walk away with an understanding how Toyota Connected is using the cloud to innovate across the enterprise. And more importantly, understand the journey that Brian will be describing to you in creating differentiated solutions and products and enhancing the brand. I will say for me, having spent some time in the supply chain and manufacturing area of automotive, I found his application, being that he represents or is from Toyota, the application of the Toyota Production System, TPS, and how it applies to IT, especially in the design and execution of platforms and how they also work with partners. He'll bring up the concept as part of lean manufacturing of MUDA, which is waste. So I'll be dropping some of these little breadcrumbs at the beginning of my presentation so that when Brian gets to it, you'll go, aha, I remember that. So automotive transformation. Look, digital transformation is still continuing across all industries. It's everywhere, it's disruptive, and it doesn't seem to be letting off soon. And also it's changing how the consumer interacts with your brand. That intimacy that the customer is expecting from companies from the services and products that they use. And you know what? It's no different in automotive. In automotive, this is, you see this convergence as you see these new technologies, and then the consumer expectation of what they will get and when they will get it. And so this convergence really is kind of encapsulated in one acronym, maybe two acronyms. You'll hear CASE and you'll hear ACES. And CASE, in this case, nice pun, in this case is connectivity, autonomous, shared mobility, whether it's in the form of car share or ride share, and it's also in the form of electrification. Now, this is also changing ways in which the consumer is accessing transportation, how they plan, how they use transportation. And also when you talk about connectivity and autonomous and electrification and shared mobility, there's also this promise of reduced emissions, right? Improved safety, right? Less congestion. But overall, it also has the promise, whether inside or outside the vehicle, this concept of an improved experience for both driver and for the passenger. It's forcing this industry that I've been a part of for a long time, this industry is like over a century old, it's forcing businesses to look at how they use the cloud, how they leverage data across that enterprise, right? It's how the brands are going to transform, how the lines of businesses are going to actually work horizontally as opposed to inside a silo. And I think also here in a moment, Brian will talk about one of the things that, as we collaborated on this presentation, this whole concept of consumers and how they want to access, with this proximity of wanting to get closer to the consumer as opposed to just working in a B2B fashion. Brian talks about consumers want to access their technology anywhere and everywhere. So this is, where we come to, well, okay, so how does the cloud apply in this environment with these trends of digital transformation? And of course, with the cloud, you can take away all the efforts that's being applied to an IT platform, right? You want to refocus those resources that are out there and supporting those IT platforms, and you want to have them differentiate your business and also empower the developers to create value for the customers as opposed to, simply working on the undifferentiated heavy IT lifting. And of course, whenever you get to this point, there's several things that are talked about. Agility, being able to spin up hundreds, if not thousands of servers in minutes. Also, Brian, as part of their journey and how they use the cloud across the enterprise, he'll talk about, hey, how did we actually reduce Muda? How do we take cost out of this business and our IT plans and designs? And so he'll talk about how they evaluated spot instances, reserve instances, and then coming to a serverless architecture. And then, of course, when you see up here about focus on innovation, it's all about speed, right? Using the cloud and speed. This whole concept, I worked for a large automotive manufacturer as well as a tier 1 supplier. And this whole concept of 3 to 5 years for a model change, no. That is really being compressed and compressed fast. So using the cloud to get the innovation and accelerate time to market is where it's at. So why AWS? Well, we've been at this for a little bit, for about 13 years, right? And we're a broadly adopted cloud platform. And it's secure, right, with over 203 security, compliance, and governance services and 165 services, IoT, machine learning, edge compute, analytics that are all being used in our automotive workloads. Now, the thing I'd also like to talk about is this obsession around customer. Everyone, you're all in here, you all understand our obsession at AWS and Amazon on the customer. But when I did some quick math, if you look at a typical production calendar, a production calendar in my industry that I'm familiar with is typically 240 calendar days. You multiply that by 8 hours, and that's 1,920 hours total in a year. And yet in 2018, we announced 1,957 features. So you divide that over the total number of hours, and it's more than one feature an hour. So it's pretty impressive, and it just, there's factual evidence, empirical data that says, yeah, we are going to work with customers. They ask for it, we're going to try and deliver it. And finally, we work with all the top OEMs, all the top tier 1s, the big dealer groups, as well as what we refer to as the auto tech companies, these great companies that are always first and trying to disrupt. And within our organization, on average, we have, I think, an average of 23 years experience of individuals, whether it's in professional services, myself, people that work as solution architects or tech leaders that have come from the automotive industry across the various functions of the automotive value chain. So as I mentioned, when we look at the challenges, right, I've already mentioned the industry transformation that's being driven by connectivity and by autonomous and shared mobility and electrification. And when we talk to the C-level is telling us, these industry trends always manifest themselves as needs within the business that needs to change. And whether in this kind of conversation, it doesn't matter whether you're the largest original equipment manufacturer or a tier one or the latest startup, right? They mention that these needs have to be addressed. For example, in product innovation, that 3 to 5 year horizon I gave you, right? That's compressing big time. So how do you use the cloud in electric vehicle development? How do you use it to bring to bear immediately the connected vehicle and autonomous development requirements that the market is desiring? And then in the area of mobility, companies are really making large investments. You see it almost weekly, if not daily, of partnerships in this space, right? Partnerships in the space, investments in technology platforms, because one single customer, one single company is trying to look to mitigate the risk, the program risk, and the investment that's involved. They can't do it by themselves, so they look and seek for technology partners, software partners, hardware partners. And they do that because they're seeking ways in which they can reduce that overall exposure. But as I've mentioned, Brian will talk about this. You see the B2B approach, but now there's so many different variations. It's not just business to business, but it's business to consumer. It's even business to business to business, or a partner and a consumer. And Brian will dive into that and talk about how they've addressed that in their business. And then, with this consumer focus, how do you manage that digital consumer? How do you take the data that sits in the sales and service area, or in the dealerships, or in your CRM system? How do I extract that? How do I pull it out? How do I target those consumers with that data? What can I learn from it? How can I track those consumers? How can I convert them? And more importantly, how do I retain them? And at that whole time, using that data across the enterprise, you're bringing the cost of that customer acquisition down. And then, manufacturing and supply chain, right? It's like, what? Well, man, when you can connect millions of devices at the edge and hundreds of your factories or your assembly centers, and you can connect also thousands of your suppliers and your logistics service providers, guess what? The cloud can help you identify and give the promise of significant cost savings. Now, as you see underneath, I think this is probably when we talk about this, both within AWS as well as with Toyota, the thing that we always see when we talk with our C-level customers is, data is always underpinning this process. And these conversations go, geez, if you could just help me locate the data, I'm not getting the data. Not only that, I can't determine what data I need, and how can I move data that's valuable from that edge to the cloud? So, in essence, the C-level is saying, help me transform my analytics. And, I think while I was referencing the latest 2019 Gartner Automotive CIO survey, and in this, I think the most common mentioned element for those CIOs in the automotive industry was data analytics. And they said this is truly a game changer within the automotive organization. So, what does that lead us to? It leads us to a digital transformation that is really a huge opportunity for change in these organizations. To be more agile, to be more efficient and innovative, but really this opportunity is a challenge. It's a multifaceted technical challenge. And when you talk to these C-levels, right, they're looking for something that's much broader in the ecosystem when they talk to Amazon or AWS or any number of SI, system integrators or ISVs. And they're realizing this requires a broader ecosystem with new capabilities, new services, and partners like AWS. And so In the area of product innovation, I want to bring up Toyota Research Institute, where they're using the latest in artificial intelligence, right, to help produce vehicles that are safer, more accessible, right, and environmentally friendly. So they're using AWS compute and deep learning to literally reduce the amount of time it takes by a factor of 4, right, to train their autonomous algorithms so that they can quickly get those back into the cars that they can test, right, as well as use in their own simulation environment. And of course, with the promise of pay-as-you-go on AWS, right, it brings down the cost of R&D and helps accelerate this innovation cycle. In the area of connected mobility, right, Ford Mobility and Autonomic. And they're using AWS IoT, machine learning analytics, and compute services, right, to power their transportation mobility cloud, TMC. And they're essentially using this TMC cloud, this transportation mobility cloud, and giving manufacturers as well as developers a cloud platform in which they can build and develop the next generation of services and products for their customers. And then, of course, when you talk about digital customer management, a great example is Audi. And again, you need a broader ecosystem, which includes partners. And in this case, I believe Audi used an advanced technical partner that's called ZeroLight. And ZeroLight used their real-time visual platform to help Audi develop a 3D vehicle configurator. And then we start moving back, okay, so what does that do? In terms of value, they were able to attract more prospects, more customers in the pre-sales end as they were configuring vehicles, for example, the e-tron, and then take that into the actual sales process. So I think they were able to attract, they had a 66% increase in attracting additional leads, able to then take those leads and close 10% more at the dealership, which of course, when you do that and convert, then that drives the revenue per vehicle as well. So this is a great example. And then, of course, manufacturing supply chain. I mentioned earlier, right, that little commercial, Volkswagen, the Volkswagen Group. I would highly encourage you to go see that presentation. We have a partnership with the Volkswagen Group, and they're using everything. They're using Outposts, they're using IoT, IoT Core, IoT Analytics. They're using Greengrass, SageMaker. They're among many, many others. And they're using these services in order to expand the value prop of not just at a line level with transfer presses, but how do I commonize this and set up a common metric for overall equipment effectiveness that looks at my machine availability, the performance, and more importantly, the quality. And to be able to globally do that with some, I think it's like over 122 factories, something like 1,500 suppliers in 30,000 locations. This is a great example of how you partner with Amazon, with AWS, to support and push through the digital transformation that's going on. All right, so I've given you a brief overview, a lot, in this time. So from the latest startup to the largest global manufacturers, they're all of us, all companies, all industries are adjusting to this new reality. And Brian, who's going to get up here, I like I said, dropping these little crumbs around. But Brian's got a really interesting, he made a very provocative statement. The relationship between a consumer, come on up, man. You don't have to stand there. The relationship, right, between a consumer and the vehicle, the one-on-one relationship is changing, right? It's not just one-on-one, but it's one to many. So it's my absolute pleasure to invite Brian, who's the Chief Technical Officer from Toyota Connected up here. So if you'll please welcome him to the stage, and I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Excellent. So About 2 years ago, our president, Akio Toyoda, announced to the world that we would begin our transformation from Toyota from an automotive company to a mobility company. And to do that, we've been focusing on 4 primary areas. As you heard earlier, right, we were looking at connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about shared and what we've done within this space. So with shared, we're really looking at creating a platform that will be able to address the changing world. Because the reality is that the world of automotive is changing. So in the past, companies made cars. They sold these cars to customers in the traditional retail process, creating a one-to-one relationship with the customer. The car created value for one customer, but today, companies are now providing mobility services and offer these services to customers in new ways. And this is really creating a one-to-many relationship with a multitude of customers, which now begins to refine or redefine value for these customers. Now, a lot of things have changed, but many things have not changed. The basics, right? The basic customer expectations. Value must exceed the price, and the experience must exceed the frictions of use, right? It has to be easy, seamless. Today we see a lot of things happening in the media and entertainment space, right? We have this new segment called cord cutters, right? Where people that have been using cable TV for many, many years, right? They no longer want to commit to 3 years for cable TV. So very much like the folks that are migrating away from cable TV to services like Hulu and Netflix, right, and Disney Plus. Similarly, we're finding segments within automotive that are almost exactly the same, right? Folks that do not want to commit to buying a car. So we actually call these key cutters. And within this segment, we've now done a number of studies, and we've been able to find out a number of things that I think really resonated with us when we did this study. So first and foremost, this segment views car ownership as an inconvenient waste of money, but in some cases necessary. They want to take mass transit or share services over everything else. And within this segment, right, it accounts for 24 million Americans that are completely unserved by automotive. Within this segment, we've decided to address, and we are now looking at how can Toyota come and really provide a service to these 24 million Americans. So in 2017, Toyota Connected partnered with Toyota Servco of Hawaii, and we launched a car share platform that allows you an easy way to get in and out of a car when you're visiting the island of Hawaii. So here's a quick video that shows you our 1.0 version of the application.
Introducing the Hui app, a station-based car share service by Servco Pacific and Toyota Connected. Through the new free mobile app, cars can be booked anytime from any place. Simply open the app and select your preferred date and time of reservation, which can be booked for as little as an hour and up to 2 weeks. Select the most convenient station location from the interactive map to view prices and available cars. Choose the one that best suits you and click Reserve. The total cost of your reservation includes gas, insurance, and taxes. Once your reservation is active, you're ready to roll. You can now pair your phone with your reserved Hui car, and your phone becomes a digital key, allowing you to lock and unlock the doors, and use the push to start button to begin your adventure. Make as many stops as you prefer along the way, and at the end of your reservation, simply return the car to its original station. Lock the doors and end your reservation through the Hui app. You will receive a notification that your bill is finalized. So whether it's a morning surf session, a Costco run, or an extended stay on the island, Hui provides a fleet of vehicles at your fingertips, equipped to meet your needs. For more information about Hui, visit drivehui.com.
So now you're in Hawaii, please go ahead and check out our app. It's been live for about 2 years. And this was really our first 1.0 mobility services platform that we launched to really kind of address this need. But through this journey, one of the things that we overlooked was scale. Now, from a technical perspective, we had no problem scaling. What we did have problem with, though, was scaling from a financial perspective. So we designed this platform very much how you would design platforms back in 2015, where we had really done all of our big data to date on-prem. And so after about 2 years of development, we were stuck with a platform that really couldn't scale technically, as I mentioned, or it could scale technically by adding additional clusters and EC2 instances, but it could not scale financially. So what we had to do is we had to start looking at how could we optimize our mobility platform. I think we came across some very low-hanging fruit initially. The storage and the transmission costs were out of control, and so we did some deep dive, and what we realized was that some of the data, actually a lot of the data that was being captured was quite useless. So for instance, when a vehicle transmits an open door status, it transmits a 1. And then when it transmits a closed door status, it transmits a 0. Pretty simple. Well, what was happening was the device was actually sampling this every 200 milliseconds. And so as you see here, right, you're now getting a 1 every 200, or only when the person jumps in the car, a 0 when it closes it, and it's actually transmitting those 0. And so muda in Japanese is our word for waste. And so what we did was, it was very easy to just change some settings on the device and capture what we call near constant values on change. And so by doing that, we reduced it to about 99% just from what we were previously storing. And so I think that was a huge savings on the storage. But on the compute side, we also had a pretty big problem. You see, as I mentioned earlier, when you have hardware on-prem, you don't really think about things like how much the hardware costs because, well, it's on-prem. And so when you design that way in the cloud, you get set up with a platform that really can't scale. So for instance, if we looked at our 1.0 platform, I like to call it the always-on platform. And so 1.0, it didn't matter if you had one vehicle or 100,000 vehicles, it still cost the same. And the analogy I always use is like it's like buying this massive parking lot, but only parking a single car in that lot. So what we did was we started diving down, and some of the things that would seem pretty obvious didn't really hit us. Like, so for instance, people, when they drive, and whether they're using our car share services or they're just using some of our safety services, they drive a lot in the morning when they're going to work. Then you start seeing it peak towards night when people are going home, and then towards like the wee hours of the night, like 3 a.m., people really aren't driving as much. And so when you have persistent clusters, you have all of this waste, right? And again, really just thinking of how we could reimagine what our next generation, our MSP, our Mobility Services Platform version 2 would look like, it really became pretty obvious. So I grabbed the engineering team and we got into a room and I gave them just some very simple directions. I said, guys, look, every message transmitted from a vehicle must provide purpose, right? It must have a purpose. It must provide quantifiable customer value, right? And be processed if and only when it was needed. It seems pretty straightforward, but as you're designing a system, you have to start thinking we now live in an IoT world where every single bit counts, right? And when you multiply that across millions of vehicles, right, it starts just escalating in terms of the cost. And so the way to manage that, you've got to just kind of harness that and really ask the question, why are we doing this? What is the purpose behind this? And so one of the great things about AWS is that we have options. So the first one, round we actually hit, we said, well, great. We have this system. It works really well. It just is very expensive. What if we went and we started putting everything in reserved instances? Well, that's great. 75% off, which everyone likes, but you have to make a commitment, right? And so some of the hardware specs that are out today, right? 3 years from now, you can process 4 to 5 times as much. And also, taking a very bad design and putting it into a reserved instance situation really isn't a great idea. So then we said, okay, well, what about spot instances? And so we really like spot instances for our analytics. We get to save sometimes up to 80 to 90% off. But the thing is that they're not there when you need them. They're not on demand. So things like our location services, which are very important to our fleet customers, really would not work for spot instance. So finally, we settled on serverless. And serverless is really, I think, is exactly what we were looking for. And it actually reminded me of something that we learned as we were going through Toyota history training. And a very famous engineer at Toyota Motor Manufacturing, and one of the founders of Toyota's just-in-time production system. So Taiichi Ohno, he is credited to be the father of the Toyota production system, which inspired lean manufacturing in the US. And the system has a very straightforward framework, which is the just-in-time production framework that says, make what is only when it is needed and only in the amount that is needed. And that went with exactly what I was thinking in terms of how I'd like to imagine our next generation mobility services platform. And so by doing this, it actually took our platform to the always-on architecture with many, many persistent clusters and having to spin up these multiple clusters to where you have this massive parking lot and only one vehicle parked there, to a conceptual, there is no parking lot. And the moment that the vehicle enters the lot, the space appears, the vehicle goes away, and it's gone. So to do this from a practical sense, we started off with our IoT platform. The first thing that happens is it actually hits consent management, because we do not pull vehicle messages unless the customer consents to that connected mobility service. Next, we hit the API gateway, Lambda. We then run it through Kinesis Lambda to take the message, process it, do the transformations, make a determination on what is this here for? Is there a purpose? If there is, it continues down to the next level, where we now do a transform and decode. We then put it in various layers depending on how we're going to be using the data. If we're going to be running analytics, it'll be in a aggregation partition. If it's being used to compute a driver score, it will actually go in there. If it's not, then it'll go into a different area. Always really maintaining the idea that this message is here for a purpose. And finally, right, if it gets to the point, it'll go to our mobility services API here, where now you can enable it for our fleet and retail customers that have subscribed. And so this was something that probably took about 4 to 5 months, I think, to really kind of re-architect. And I got to tell you, the feeling I felt after we was quite amazing. And I don't know, some of the folks here remember back in the 80s, there was this Toyota ad called "Oh, What a Feeling." Well, that's exactly how I felt, because we literally saved millions of dollars moving from persistent clusters to serverless. And so I think that was a great opportunity. And but that's just on the data side. There were still a lot of things that we had not missed, and a lot of things were, as we did this platform for our Hawaiian dealership, Hui, we realized that this was not something that we could take to the world. We had to really start thinking larger, bigger than just Hui, because the reality is that most fleet companies, they don't just have Toyota vehicles. They also have Audi, they have Nissan, they have Ford. I mean, ideally, they're only Toyotas, but since they're not going to be only Toyotas, fleet companies are going to be apprehensive when we try to say, hey, come into our platform, which was a closed platform. So just imagine, right? We have this really great relationship with Avis. They use our mobility services today. And once we developed our digital key technology, they said, that's great. When can we get this into our platform? Well, we said, you know what? We can give this to you tomorrow, but you're going to have to come into our platform. And they said, well, Yeah, I don't think so. Because the reality is that it's not our customer, it's not a Toyota customer anymore. It is now an Avis customer when they are using an Avis app, and they're going to have an Avis experience. And so it really made us rethink this idea of having a closed platform and what we could do to shift from a closed platform to an open platform. Because we now not just had B2C, we had B2B, and we even had a B2B2C type of use cases that we had to work on. And so to support this, it just is very simple, but it was something that, you just don't think about when you're building out a platform, which is that customers want their technology anywhere and everywhere. So whether it's a car rental company that is providing connected mobility services to their customers, or maybe it could be a hotel that a Toyota dealership is partnering with that is putting vehicles in their garage so that a hotel customer can get in and out of a Toyota vehicle as part of their vacation experience. So to do this, we looked at what an open mobility services platform would look like, and really it starts with the Toyota vehicle, because at the core, that's who we are, right? We make cars, and so Toyota and the vehicle technology are at the very center. Around that, data, access, multimedia, and the communication device are all part of that Toyota vehicle. Toyota Connected now takes API management and the data coming out of that vehicle, the access available, and creates services. So services like location, health, right, or our micro-collision service. Access services. So we have two different types of access. One is our digital key. The other is our remote access. And so I like to differentiate these because I think it's kind of interesting. Remote access has been around for many, many years. So you have been able to turn on your Toyota vehicle probably for about 8 or 9 years. But the problem with remote access is that it requires connectivity. So to be able to ensure the safety of our customers and realizing that these new one-to-many relationships are going to have many, many people inside vehicles, we are now having to look at how do we provision a key to a person's mobile device and make sure that it works underground, right? Or places where there isn't connectivity. So on the island of Hawaii, there are actually places that have no connection whatsoever as you're going up into the mountains and looking at the volcanoes. Our device is able to provision that key and make sure that key is locked to that customer's mobile device and allow them to get in and out of their car where there is no connectivity. Multimedia applications will be now linking with that mobility experience, as well as different type of safety services, device management services, consent management services, and of course our API management. And finally, all of that is kind of brought together within our mobility service portal, as well as our subscription management portal to make sure that everything is consented to and that the services have been provisioned correctly. And so when we designed this platform, we had to make the realization that just like digital key, right, people wanted things like key as a service. Well, we didn't want to package everything and say, you must now take these 15 services. We wanted to make sure that customers can pick and choose the services that made sense for them. So our fleet owners, the first thing that they say when we say, hey, you know what, we have these great services to really supercharge your existing fleet management and your loaner and your rental programs, and we're here to help you. And some of them were actually pretty apprehensive. They're saying, hey, I'm not sure I want to really participate, because if I'm going to have 15, 20 people in a car, renting the car by the hour, I may, be concerned about liability. And, if someone's going to wreck the car, are they going to take the pictures correctly? Are there going to be disputes? And we said, well, you know what? That's great. Our data scientists at Toyota Connected have actually developed something really cool. It's called a micro-collision. And a micro-collision really is what we're able to take out of the CAN data to understand things that fall below the threshold of a airbag deployment. So things like bumps and scratches, we're able to actually tie right back to a reservation, and that way you could know if you have 15 reservations, who the person was that actually had that accident if the person after them did not report or did not notice this tiny scratch or this ding on the vehicle. So this was something really, I think, cool that our data scientists came up with, and is something that I've not seen in the industry, and I'm very proud of to talk about today. But just this idea that you can use what you want and only what you want is really what we've gone for. And so to kind of walk you through this, the architecture of the platform, I wanted to kind of talk through who the partners are in the ecosystem and what makes this ecosystem up. So traditionally, right, Toyota, as a vehicle distributor, they are also the mobility services owner. So part of MSRP actually goes into the mobility services of every vehicle. Now, they sell cars to dealers who then in turn sell cars to customers. They also sell cars to third parties, companies that specialize in car rental such as Avis, Enterprise, Hertz, Budget, et cetera, as well as companies that do rideshare, so like New York Taxi buy all of their Priuses through Toyota and the vehicle distributor. Now, the retail brand customer, that relationship is with Toyota headquarters, the vehicle distributor, as well as the dealership. And so when we say a Toyota customer, it's a person that's bought a car from a dealership. Now, in a sense, right, a third party such as Avis, right, they have their own customers, and that's a rental customer. And we want to be able to provide those services to companies like Avis, because we want to make sure that every Toyota vehicle has an opportunity to maximize the utilization of that vehicle and the technology in that vehicle. We want to make it easy, we want to make it safe, we want to make it secure. The other thing is that we don't want to let our dealers down, because our dealers also want to be able to provide rental services, and so those same services we provide to our dealers. But now we've seen some interesting, changes in where there's now another party. This is the B2B2B, which is what we call a station partner. So many dealers, they will actually work with hotels, airports, parking lot owners to have their cars stay at these station partners. And in some cases, like a hotel is going to have their own customers. You know, the digital key, technology extends to hotel customers as well. So many hotels today will have an app, and they recognize that the same exact use case is there for hotels and for travel and hospitality, in that a person gets off a plane, they get to the hotel, and the last thing they want to do is wait in line, right? The last thing they want to do is wait in line for 15, 20 minutes just to get to a key. Now they're enabling their customers to be able to get into the hotel, check in on their mobile phone, go up to their room, and as long as the room's ready, they get a notification saying that the room's ready, and they jump into the room and they relax. And so we now want to extend that and say, hey, well, we get that this is a hotel customer. How about the concept of a keychain? And so after that person has rested for the night, they are now wide awake, and they say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do an Uber because I want to drive around the country. I want to take my time. I want to check out some sites. They look on their hotel app, and here are 5 new Lexus vehicles that are right there for them to start using. They can now go down to the garage, reserve that vehicle, jump in with that same app, and now they have a customer experience that's all really contained within that hotel app, but it all ties back down to the mobility services that are provided by the vehicle distributor and the dealers that actually own those vehicles and want to make sure they protect that residual value, but also monetize those vehicles so that they get additional cycles out of that. So now we start seeing things like B2C, which is provisioning a digital key, B2B, providing fleet management tools for our dealers so that they can enhance their fleet management, B2B2C, which now allows a third party to be able to take on but use their own apps, And then you got the B2B to B2C, which is my favorite and probably most challenging, which is now we're taking a partner of that dealer and providing almost an SDK as well as the services to now complement their existing apps. The first one right here, right, as I mentioned, very, very simple. Toyota customer downloads the Toyota Owners app. They go in for either whether it's a loaner or a rental. Actually, I take that back. This is the retail flow. So a retail customer, they say, you know what, I'm going to enable a mobility service of which is digital key. Digital key now is something that they want to either own on their own app, or they want to be able to pass it on through to their friends and family, and they're able to do that by using their Toyota One app and then consenting to the subscription and choosing who they want to be able to pass that to, and then they use our mobility API management platform to be able to enable that service. The next one is a little bit more complicated. It's now our dealers. So focus here on this guy right here. So dealer-owned vehicles, they actually have a reservation management system. They then also go through the consent and subscription management. But it's that same Toyota customer with that same app. Now they have what we call the Toyota Flex dealership flow, which then allows them to now jump into either a loaner or a vehicle that they want to try out for the weekend or for a week at a Toyota dealership. Where we get a little bit more complicated here is now that same dealer, right? So the dealer-owned vehicles, they now have a commercial agreement with the station partner. Station partner has a station app developer that goes into our mobility services portal. They then use the API management to then go and create a station app, and then the station customer, once that's enabled and the vehicles are provisioned, can now check out vehicles through that app to really complement their hotel experience. And then finally, this is the simpler version. Notice here, right, we've blanked this out because, as I mentioned earlier, right, customers want their services where they want them, right? A customer like Avis has what you may argue one of the greatest reservation systems in the world, right? They've been only doing it for 40 years. And so, of course, they're not going to use ours. So they're going to now take their own vehicles and they're going to use their own reservation app and run through the same flow, where their developers are going to create an experience that is leveraging the Toyota mobility services, but also providing them something that's very unique to their customers. So to do this, this is now what we call the mobility marketplace architecture. Version 1 is going to be launching at the end of this year, and it allows fleet owners to then go through a API gateway. They will take a list of their vehicles, and the first thing that happens is it goes through a processing router, then to the data store writer that writes it to DynamoDB. We use DynamoDB to be able to collect the latest status and provide upserts to now update that record based on the multiple validations that we do. We now run it through a number of queues, so we throw it through the Amazon SQS queue, where you can see there, to validate that the structure of the is correct. We also then check ownership. Ownership then goes back to the distributor platform. So a record, the record of authority on whether or not the fleet customer owns that vehicle can be checked back based on what we call the retail sales record that's owned by Toyota Motor North America. Then we also do another check to make sure once it's successful, we also want to check to make sure that now that owner has consented to these services. Once we validate that they've consented to services, we write then what the subscription services are. That then creates a service availability API, which then is accessed every time a fleet owner tries to hook up one of our API services through our API service layer. So going through all of that really is how we were able to architect a very flexible system that allows customers to really use what they need and choose the services and the many options we provide in our open mobility services platform. So, it's something that we felt that we needed to do to make things very fast, scalable, and provide both our engineers at Toyota Connected as well as engineers at our partner companies options to be able to build their services and build the next generation of mobility applications out there. And so while we were doing, it was kind of funny. I was telling Thad, I almost felt like in a way we were almost making our own AWS, right? Because it was using the same types of services, the same types of options that are provided to AWS customers, not unlike, what everyone uses today. And so, it's really that idea of saying, hey, you know what, rather than building apps, we want to provide the building blocks to enable mobility, right? And so with that, that's how Toyota Connected is doing our part, bringing mobility for all to Toyota customers and Toyota fleet owners. And with that, I think we're going to be doing a Q&A in about, 5-10 minutes in another room. I'll hand it over to Thad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. That's great. So 3 things as we close this session. First off, you've just heard from the second largest automotive manufacturer in the world, in Toyota, how they're addressing digital transformation. And we have other examples, right? Earlier in this presentation, I talked about Volkswagen. You also have the same thing with BMW. So I hope, again, when Brian and I started this process, you're walking out of here understanding how Toyota and other companies and how you can apply the cloud to digitally transform your enterprise. There's, these examples are fantastic in that using partners, using philosophies and frameworks in TPS, they are essentially transforming how they interact with their customer and providing value to that customer. So very powerful example, and I'm glad that all of you had the chance to hear this. So the second point is at 3 o'clock, you can meet us over here in the Aria, we're on the same level, in the Ironwood foyer. I think, Mark, it's just out the doors and to the left, right? And so just meet us over there in the Automotive Lounge, and we'll answer your questions, and that'll be great. And then finally, don't forget to complete the session survey in the mobile app. That would be greatly appreciated if you'd open up and take a few moments and do that. So again, on behalf of AWS and Amazon Web Services, I want to thank Brian. Let's give him another hand. Thank you.